people we trust most, and about moments so small on the outside, yet so powerful they split lives in two. Every week, I share emotional, true-style stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. So if you believe stories matter, if you believe they can shake us, comfort us, and sometimes even save us, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. Now take a breath, because what I'm about to share isn't just a story. It's a single night. One ordinary Friday that turned extraordinary in the worst way. The night my stepson came home drunk and told me the truth that destroyed my marriage. My name is Emily Carter, and this is what really happened. It started like any other Friday night. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. The house was quiet in that deep late evening way, the kind of silence that wraps itself around you and makes even your own footsteps sound too loud. The kitchen lights were still on, casting a warm yellow glow over freshly cleaned countertops. The dishwasher hummed softly in the background, doing its slow, dependable work. I had just dried the last plate and slid it into the cabinet when I glanced at the clock on the microwave. 10:47 p.m. Tom still wasn't home. That wasn't unusual anymore. And that realization alone made my chest tighten. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, folded it neatly, and hung it back where it belonged. I told myself I'd head upstairs in a minute. I always did that now. Found small reasons to delay going to bed, as if sleep might force me to admit how lonely the evenings had become. Then I heard it. The faint rattle of the front doorknob. At first, I smiled automatically. My body reacted before my heart could catch up. But the smile faded just as quickly when the door creaked open. And the figure that stumbled inside wasn't my husband. It was Jake. Even before he stepped fully into the light, the smell hit me, sharp and sour and heavy. Not just alcohol. It was layered. Vodka, beer, and something darker beneath it. Something emotional. The kind of smell you don't wash off with soap. Regret. Anger. Pain. Jake, I said, already moving toward him. He swayed slightly as he shut the door behind him, pressing his forehead against it for just a second too long. When he turned around, his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed red like he hadn't slept, or cried, or both. His shirt was wrinkled and half untucked, his hair a mess, like he'd dragged his hands through it over and over again. Jake wasn't a reckless kid. He drank sometimes, sure, he was in college, but this wasn't casual. This wasn't fun. This was someone trying to forget something that wouldn't let go. You okay? I asked softly. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And in that moment, a cold certainty settled in my stomach. Something was very, very wrong. Before I tell you what Jake said that night, before I explain how a single conversation shattered everything I believed about my marriage, you need to understand how we got here. Because stories like this don't begin with betrayal. They begin in the quiet places where we think we're safe. I met Tom when I was 38. By then, I was already tired in ways that had nothing to do with age. I was divorced, emotionally bruised, and quietly disappointed in love. I had spent years giving my heart to people who didn't know how to hold it. People who mistook kindness for weakness, who took and called it love. Then there was Tom. I met him at a small community fundraiser. One of those low-key events with folding tables, lukewarm coffee, and polite conversation. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just existed in this calm, grounded way that made the chaos around him feel softer. At one point, I was struggling to carry a stack of heavy boxes to my car when he appeared beside me and simply said, "Those look heavier than they should be. Let me help." That tiny moment became a conversation. That conversation became a connection. And that connection changed my life. Tom listened when I spoke. Not the polite nodding kind of listening, but the kind where you can tell someone is actually absorbing your words. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered small details. He made me feel seen without ever demanding anything from me. By the end of that night, I wasn't just hopeful. I was convinced life was giving me a second chance. A year later, we were married. And for a while life felt peaceful in the best possible way. Like curling up under a warm blanket after standing in the rain for too long. Tom worked as a financial consultant. He liked routines. Morning coffee at exactly 7:15. Gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays. A short walk after dinner, no matter the weather. I owned a small floral shop downtown. It wasn't big, but it was mine. My days were filled with color, with fragrance, with the simple joy of creating something beautiful from loose stems and quiet patience. On weekends, we cooked together. Pasta one night, stir-fry the next. We laughed about burnt garlic and forgotten groceries. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't passionate in the movie sense. It was steady, and I thought steady meant safe. Jake was away at college when Tom and I married. I'd only met him briefly before the wedding, quiet, polite, distant. He didn't call me Mom, and I never expected him to. All I wanted was to be a safe place in his life. Not a replacement. Not an intruder. That first Christmas after the wedding, I noticed how careful he was, how he kept his emotions tucked away, how he stayed respectful but distant. Kids of divorce learn early how to build walls. I didn't push him, but quietly, I hoped one day he'd trust me enough to step into my world. They say peace doesn't always vanish in a storm. Sometimes it fades like a whisper. For me, it started with Tom coming home late. At first he texted. Meeting ran long. Client emergency. Be home soon. I didn't question it. I promised myself I wouldn't become paranoid. My first marriage had ended because I spent too much time fearing the worst. But soon, the text stopped. Tom began coming home after midnight, not drunk, just slightly buzzed. And sometimes he smelled like whiskey and perfume. Not mine. I told myself I was imagining things. That love required trust. That doubt was a poison. But the ache grew. Quiet at first. Then sharp. Then impossible to ignore. A few weeks later, Jake came home for the summer. He was older now. Taller. Leaner. But his eyes were heavier. He barely spoke to his father. They passed each other in hallways like strangers. Jake lingered around the house fixing things that didn't need fixing. And sometimes, I'd catch him watching me with an expression that looked like guilt or warning. One night, I found him sitting alone, staring at a blank television screen. Rough day? I asked. He laughed, bitter and tired. You could say that. That was the first time I truly saw it. The pain he was carrying, and the secret he didn't know how to release. And then came that Friday night. The night everything unraveled. At 7:42 p.m., Tom texted that he'd be late again. I didn't reply. At 11:30 p.m., Jake stumbled through the door, drunk, angry, broken. Jake, I said, rushing toward him. Are you okay? He waved me off, then looked at me with an expression I will never forget. The look of someone who has held the truth for too long. Don't pretend you don't know, he muttered. My heart jumped. Know what? He collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Dad, he said. He's not who you think he is. Jake, you're drunk. He cut me off sharply. No, he said, voice cracking. I'm not lying, Emily.